to go. In about 5 seconds, we'll be live. Okay, and we are live.
Okay, Board of Port Wardens will come to order. I'm Gene Gowder, the chair, and with me tonight is Willie Sampson, the vice chair, John Butler, Scott Anderson, and a brand new member, Robert Shapiro. So first of all, we'd like to welcome Robert. You go by Robert or Bob? You're
muted. He's muted. There you go.
Yeah, Robert.
Okay, Robert. Well, welcome to the Board of Port Wardens. The rules are that you say anything you want to and don't be intimidated despite all of our loquaciousness. So chime in whenever you want to, and welcome. I guess we have Carrie Berger, Assistant City Attorney, and Kevin Scott with the Planning and Zoning with us. And so we have a quorum. You have before you the agenda for tonight, and I would like to propose that we do 3, 5, 1, 2, 4. Now, I think 3 and 5 do not have any further public comments, and rather than leaving everyone in the wings, that might expedite things. Also, rather than kind of a motion, I make that motion that we alter that agenda. John?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded, so that will be our agenda. We will go 3, 5, 1, 2, 4. We have before you the minutes from October the 27th. I've reviewed them and I have no concerns. Does anyone else have any concerns? If not, I'll take a motion.
Take a motion to approve.
Second. Second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
They are approved. You also have finding of fact of the application at 717 Chester Avenue. And I've reviewed them, have no problems. Anyone have any concerns? If not, can I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Been moved, second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Unanimously approved. So we're now going to move to old business. We have no new business tonight. We have 5 applications held over from last week, and we will move to number 3, the Jeff Eckel. So if there's anyone that is going to testify or speak on this, I guess we have to admit them into the room, and then I will swear them in. Is there anyone, Mr. Eckel, anyone on this application? Okay, there will be no comments on this. So before the
well, Gene, I just say I think the applicant's consultant is in the room. Mark, can you move over Lauren Heinzen?
Hang on just a second. Okay.
we don't have to have testimony review. This is for our deliberation based on the evidence before us. And
Okay.
and there's been no additional information, no input.
We've gotten no additional public comment. That's correct.
Right. So I would propose that we adopt the staff report as our findings of fact and that we approve this application.
Motion to approve.
Then moved, seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So number 3 is approved. That's the Eckel application of Eastern Avenue. We will now move to number 5.
Gene, can I just ask a question?
Of course you can.
So Mr. Shapiro was given all of the documents. He's a new board member and he's watched all the videos and read in. Can he confirm that is he participating in all of these?
I'm here. I think I said to Carrie earlier, I'm a little wet behind the ears. So although I've watched the videos multiple times and I've read the comments and all the documentation, I'm going to sort of get familiar a little bit more so before I probably vote.
Okay, so you didn't participate on that last item?
I did not. I kept my mouth.
Can you just clarify when you are participating?
I will.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so that
And
application,
then I also have a question. So the public testimony part of this was left open. Do we have to close that, or? I think we probably need to have the chair declare that it's closed.
yeah, who is that?
This is Tammy.
Oh, hi, Tammy.
Hi.
Then let's go back and the record is closed.
Live
Three.
hearing looks like these days.
The staff report is adopted, is incorporated in the record, and we adopt that as our findings. And I have moved that we approve it. So, and I have a second. So all in favor of those?
Actually, Gene, sorry, Gene, I have a point on terms of the findings. We had this discussion last month where the lateral lines are not drawn according to Title 15. We're okay, we're okay with the application, but the staff report says it complies with 15, and we just need to, I think we need to make that generic statement we've made before about the lateral lines. We're not making that I forget what the words are that we've used, but we're
I
not.
second that amendment, that the approval does not
Would you have done
reflect the court warden's opinion on the accuracy.
City Hall.
Someone's mic is open. Can you either mute it or get off?
Carl Shaler.
Did I commit a foul? Sorry.
Please mute your mic. And do not come on until your application is up, please. So John, with that language, I second your amendment. So now, can we have a vote on that application to approve it as stated?
I move.
Aye.
Aye. That was a 4-0 vote. Robert did not vote. And Robert, one of the things I want to just kind of instruct you about is I tend to move fairly fast, and sometimes it appears as if I'm running over someone. So please feel free at any time to interrupt and say, I want to be heard or something or whatever.
No problem.
As long as you're polite, we'll accept it. Okay, the next application is number 3, the Jeff Eckel application. No, I'm sorry, number 5, the Edgewood Road application. We have had no additional comments. The record has been left open, and if there's no one that is going to add additional testimony at this time, I move we close the record. And as we did the previous application, we accept the staff report of the finding of facts, provided it has the language that that does not, well, there were lateral lines drawn on here, so that does not necessarily mean the wardens accept the lateral lines.
I think in this case, the lateral lines look like they complied with 15, though.
All right, I move we approve this application, make the staff report part of the record, and reflect that in the finding of facts.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
That again is a 4-0 vote. Okay, now we're back to application number 1.
I'm sorry, I had my hand raised for that. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to quickly add, because I missed the public testimony from the last meeting, but I was not in favor of any application that would impact public access for various reasons, including the access that my community relies on to the waterway. I'm not sure if that was cleared up in any of the findings or over the course of the last meeting with the legal team, but I just wanted to make that input known as it related to that project.
Mr. Alderman, pardon me, but we just approved the project on Edgewood Road. Are you referring to that one?
Oh, wow. I'm on the wrong document. My apologies. I'm on the completely wrong document.
I like that because it reflects me. So So
I'm looking at something from a different date. My apologies.
Okay, now we're going to just calm down, slow down, and we've approved two. We now have three before us. The first is the application of the city of Annapolis for Newman Street. And is Ms. Greco here with us tonight?
Jean, hi, this is Sally Nash from City of Annapolis Planning and Zoning. No, Lisa was not able to be here tonight. How I would say this project is very, very important for the city, and it's a bit time sensitive. So we're really hoping that we will get an approval from this body tonight. Thank you.
But Dr. Mash, maybe you can help me here, because I have a real problem with this application, and for two reasons. Our responsibility is to worry about navigational concerns, and this project narrows what is essentially a symbol of Annapolis, Eagle Alley, narrows it by 3 feet. It also has a jog in the bulkhead as designed of 3 feet, meaning if someone were to be going along the bulkhead in a boat, low visibility at night or something, then that would be, to me, a hazard to navigation. And I'm not an engineer, and I know Ms. Greco was very kind in trying to explain the reasons why the city didn't specify in their that the engineers would try to avoid those two things. And just as a layperson trying to protect the public's waterway and navigational hazard, can you explain to me one more time why this is the only alternative? I was there today. I looked at it. There's ample room up Newman Street to do essentially whatever you want to, up to whatever that raised bulkhead is, I assume, that has the water pumps in it. So tell me one more time. Believe me, I'm not trying to hold this project up, and I don't want to be the person that holds it up, because I would irritate a lot of people in the community. So would you just tell me one more time why this is the only alternative?
Well, I don't know the exact reasons. I mean, maybe Kevin does because he maybe was listening better than I was at the last meeting. But I know Lisa looked at all the alternatives very carefully. That in Public Works, they would not do anything that would endanger boaters. They're a very careful group down there, and I can just tell you that I know, based on my knowledge of Lisa and the Public Works team, that this was carefully considered, and that this was the best option based on what they had available to them. You know, we're never working in a really ideal environment, but
When you say what's available to them, is that resources or budget?
well, I don't know enough about the project to tell you. I imagine both, and other physical limitations on the site. But I'm afraid I just don't know enough specifics about it. But I know she did try very hard to address all your questions. But Kevin, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, just to recall from what Lisa Greco, the city's engineer, explained, the web of utilities under Newman Street and the Fleet Reserve building that is right upon that bulkhead, that digging out behind to put the bulkhead back in place is not a viable alternative to support all of that structure from a just logistically is not possible. So they're proposing this cantilever bulkhead that goes out in front. They're complying with the state and federal regulations to build 18 inches in front of the existing bulkhead. And with the cantilever bulkhead, that will ensure that in the future, if the bulkhead, and this is the same design that they did on the other side of Eagle Alley for that bulkhead replacement that we see today with the concrete cap, in the future, if they ever have to replace the bulkhead with the cantilever bulkhead, it's essentially freestanding, so they can come back behind it and then take and dig out, because that bulkhead will be supporting all of that infrastructure. So it won't be a continuation of Eagle Alley continuing to get narrowed down. This would be the extent of the intrusion. So however many years in the future, they would then go back a step. And then presumably another cantilever bulkhead, and they could just stay in place. So this is the alternative she explained. She's the engineer, the consultants are engineers, and that's the solution that they've proposed.
Thank you. Any other comment or? Sally, Dr. Nash, I'm sorry. You mentioned time sensitivity.
Yes.
What if this were not considered until January?
I worry that there would be some financial consequences.
I believe they plan to start construction this spring.
In the spring?
I believe so. They have the state and federal authorizations are lined up, historic preservation authorizations, so they are on the move. So this project is ready to go. And this addresses a larger issue with nuisance flooding. If you've ever had to drive all the way around the barn to get to downtown Annapolis, you've noticed the compromised street floods twice a month. So this will solve this problem.
I'm a little confused. If they start in the spring, what's the emergency?
Well, they don't have all their permits that they need yet. They need this approval before they can go forward with other approvals.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I'm unconvinced that the city did their best to try to protect navigation. I see no one in this whole process that's worried about the water as a place that's supposed to be the sailing capital of the world. I just find a delegation to consulting engineers to come up with something, and then you just total endorsement of that. So I am unconvinced, but do I have a motion from any member of the board? If not, I'm happy to entertain any motion. If not, I'm going to propose we again postpone this until.
Is there any discussion on the issue? Because you haven't asked for any additional information from the city, and to continue to postpone the decision on this is problematic for the city. So we would like you to come to a decision on this.
Well, I'd like, but my discussion would be, I'd like more convincing information. If the city doesn't have it, then they just assume we were going to rubber stamp this. And you're not an advocate on this, Kevin. You're staffing us.
Understood.
I'd like to have the opportunity to actually go look at it again.
Yes, I have not looked at it, and I would like to have a chance to look at it and see what that impact of that 3 feet looks like.
And also consider the bump out when you do that, as opposed to just the intrusion in the water.
That's fine. I do think that Lisa came to you before you 3 times and tried to answer all of your questions. I think you talked about a field visit last time. I'm not sure why that didn't happen in the past month, but we need to get moving on this. If it's a site visit, then let's do a site visit. But I'm just not hearing that what will convince you or what further information you really need exactly that we can provide.
Other than the allegation, this is the best we can do, it would be evidence that, as I asked for before, that instructions were given to the consulting engineers to impede the water as little as you could, as opposed to saying, give us alternatives and we'll look at them. I mean, the city did nothing in their specs to try to protect the intrusion into the water or the bump out. And I think that's a very cavalier view toward the navigating public.
Well, I would put forth that that is not really a fair characterization of the process, although I cannot defend our process as I was not part of it. But I know that Lisa Greco did attempt to explain it to you on several occasions.
No, she did it last last time, one occasion, and I was unconvinced. Me personally. If anyone else is not, then we can do this two ways. We can have a formal site visit, which we will have to advertise and have the public there, or individuals, no more than two at a time, so we don't have a quorum, can go look at it on their own, as I did today.
Can it be done as a special meeting? That's the only item to be discussed is that application, and we can actually then, maybe Lisa can provide some more information. Maybe we can have a conversation there on site. And I don't know.
I think that's a good idea.
Can I jump in very quickly just to sort of review a couple of things? You as the chair can keep the public hearing open for a reasonable period of time to allow additional evidence or testimony. But if there's specific evidence or maybe lack thereof that you're looking for, that has to be indicated as part of that reasonableness. If you guys want to do a site visit, then you have to vote on it at this meeting, and you have to, put it on the record that there's going to be a site visit that's done. You have to allow for the public to attend. You have to allow for the applicant or any representative of the applicant to attend. There can't be any discussions of the merit of the application at the particular site visit. That would have to wait until the following meeting, where it is then put on the record that the site visit took place and the observations made at the site visit. I don't know if that clarifies anything, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Harry, couldn't we have a site visit and a special meeting of the board?
You can have a special meeting anytime that you want. Yes. So you could, if you wanted to, for hypothetical purposes, if you wanted to have a site visit next week at this meeting, then you would have to put on the record that and vote that you guys are doing the site visit. You have to put out notice so that the public can attend if they so choose, and the other parties that I mentioned. And then you could have a special meeting the week after next to discuss what you guys observed at the site visit.
How much time notice do we have to give to the public that we're going to have a site visit?
I would have to look at your, generally it's at least 24 hours notice. That's under the Open Meetings Act, but I would have to look at your rules and regs and see, or rules of procedure to see if it's, let me double check.
While you're doing that, Carrie.
No, you just need to do 24 hours.
John, if this works, how about having a site visit next week? Next week, first week in December, and then a special meeting to consider this application the next week. The special meeting would be virtual.
Right. The problem I have is the site visit's not virtual, and I'm not available next week.
Okay.
I would be available the following week.
How about let's do a site visit the following week? And then Carrie, how long after the site visit before we can have the special meeting? Can we have a site visit in the morning and a special meeting that afternoon?
You could, as long as you make sure that the notice, you may want to do two separate forms of notice, but as long as there's 24 hours notice for each. So you could have it site visit, and then you could have it later in the afternoon where you have the meeting if you want. Just make sure that when the notice goes out, it's clearly distinguished that it's a site visit and then also a special meeting.
Gene, my understanding is if you declare when that special meeting will occur, we won't have to re-advertise. The announcement tonight will be that advertisement. Because if we have to re-advertise, then it's a 15-day advertising.
Re-advertise for
10 days, I'm sorry.
Re-advertise for what, Kevin?
For a special meeting. So this has already been advertised. Everyone's here who's here. So if the chair designates when the next meeting is, they don't have to do a formal advertising again.
So for compliance with the Open Meetings Act, because the Open Meetings Act, you only need 24 hours notice of the agenda and notice of the meeting. The agenda should come out with the notice, but where's the 10 days part coming from? I mean, we can sort of figure it out off the record instead of taking up time of this meeting, but I'm not sure where I follow with the 10 days part.
Well,
just the normal notice for Port Wardens meetings.
Well, because I don't want to be the skunk that, that frustrates the city's plans. I think John has a great idea that they'll have a site visit week after next. And John, do you have a particular day or time you would like to do it?
I have a unmuted. I have a conflict Tuesday morning. No, Tuesday evening. No, that'd be fine. So I'm available. I have a lot of flexibility that week.
As it turns out, I don't. Monday afternoon?
Good for me.
Monday afternoon at say 2 p.m.
That's the
Monday afternoon, 2 p.m.
7th of December.
7th of December, 2 p.m. To be followed by a virtual meeting at 7 o'clock that night to consider the application. I make a motion that we have a special site visit on December the 7th at 2 p.m. at the end of Newman Street, to be followed by a 7 p.m. virtual meeting to vote on this, to deliberate and vote on this application.
I'll second that motion.
Can I just ask a question of the TV staff real quick? Are we able to broadcast a special meeting on December 7th at 7 p.m.?
This is Mark with the TV studio. Theoretically, as long as no other meetings are scheduled, there is another commission meeting, but we have the ability to do 2 at once. So
And there's a public safety committee that night.
well, public safety
No, that's
committee is
4 o'clock.
right. So it's Human Relations Commission at
Human
6:30.
6:30. Yeah.
So it could
And
be
then
scheduled.
Education Commission at 6.
That's on Tuesday the 8th.
Okay. Just want to make sure there wasn't a scheduling conflict.
Right, but there is not any ability for us to broadcast a site visit, just so everybody knows.
No, understood.
That's not needed. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
That was 4-0. And Robert, I assume you will join us, please.
Yes, I'm voting yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can vote.
Any other comments on that application? If not, we'll move to the Lewis West Marital Trust, 11 Southgate. And I guess all people that are going, anyone that is going to comment on this, please admit them into the room.
Okay, I'll activate them now.
And let me thank everyone for bearing with me.
Okay, we have Dan Lyrian and Anthony Christoph. Is there anyone else that I've missed?
Jack Biddle.
It's activated, Daniel Lewis. And
You want to hold off on public testimony right now until your hearing is concluded. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Yes, except if anyone is going to say anything to the public, I've got to swear them in now.
all right.
Okay, so we have Jack Biddle of Southgate, Stephen Hyatt.
Yep, Mayor.
Thomas Wood.
And Thomas Wood.
Andrew Price.
I see Andrew Price, okay.
Dan Lyrian.
And if I've missed anybody, please raise your hand. William Bauer, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, that should be everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. If any and everyone that is going to speak in regard to this application, will you please raise your right hand? And do you swear to tell the truth to the Port Wardens, to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. All right, this application, we now have a revised application. And we also had some filings, some of them late this afternoon. So before I ask anyone to comment, did any port wardens have any comment about this application? If not, I'm going to proceed to have the public testify. John?
I have a question about it, and maybe it's for Mr. Larian. I'm looking at the what is this? Something we got today. The ladder line exhibit that has letters on it: C, D, E, F, M, N, O, etc. Labeled lines.
Who's that from, John?
Maybe that didn't come from you guys. Maybe that came from a public comment. I'm not sure.
I didn't send any ladder line revisions in today.
Okay.
Tony Christoph sent in a lateral line exhibit and a photograph.
Oh, so that was from, that's gonna be in the public.
The one that says applicant exhibit in the file name.
Yeah, well, let me look at the one we have before, because I had a question about the ladder lines. I know from, just that one had nice labels on it, but let me, sorry, bear with me.
And that will be Exhibit E.
You want to sit in on this, Sweeney? Oh, yes.
Whoever's talking to Sweetie should mute their mics.
I don't want to mute my mic.
Mark, can you bring Tony Christoph over? He says he can't get through.
Okay, yes, I found.
He is in as panelist.
He says that his mic won't unmute and wanted to make a opening statement to the chair.
Yep, he should be able
working
to.
on him now.
That's not on our end.
Yeah, he's not unmuting.
John, did you reach the end of your?
I did find. Sorry, there was some other conversation going on.
There you go.
I found. I'm trying to figure out where this is labeled. Plan sheet, existing site plan sheet 2, I guess. That's depicting lateral lines. What I don't see is, since the lateral lines converge on the adjacent property to the, I guess that's the east, northeast. I don't see where the second step of determining whether or not the lateral lines are okay to use, and then following that additional step of bringing out the lateral lines.
Chairman, can you hear me now?
Harbor.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Anthony F. Christoph. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'd like to clarify initially that the exhibits which have been submitted to the board through Kevin are in fact part of the record and don't have to be reintroduced through witnesses today.
They are part of the record. They do not have to be reintroduced.
And I have 3 witnesses that I intend to produce, and I think that would be, unless you want the planning and zoning to proceed with their case first. They're not members of the public. They're witnesses testifying on behalf of the applicant.
I would like for you to wait your turn while the port warden continues to ask his questions, if you don't mind. Go ahead, John.
Okay, and I've turned the page while he was talking. To sheet 3 shows it even better. So my concern is that let's see, let me pull up here. The first step of doing the lateral lines, this appears to represent. And then there's the part where you check to see whether or not they are okay. I forget the word. I'm trying to look up the wording. Anyway, I could look up the wording, but there's a step where you check to see if they're okay. Basically, is everybody getting access to the harbor? And then if not, then there's an additional step to modify the lateral lines. And I don't see where that was done. And so maybe Mr. Larian can explain why you stopped at the first step of just drawing the lateral lines without the modification.
Mr. Butler, if I may, there is an exhibit that was introduced. It's a colored blue and red exhibit, was prepared by the engineer and the professional licensed surveyor, which depicts the modified lateral lines as determined for 9 and 5 Southgate Avenue. Their testimony would be, if you care to hear it from me, that the modification process does not result in a harbor line segment of 25 feet under the previous application. It does under the amended application.
Okay, so the amended, Scott, Kevin, when did we receive the amended application? Is that just something that just came in email?
Forwarded it to you on November 19th, and then I forward you additional exhibits today.
Yes. So the amended application, I do have that, I think.
That was part of the application that was submitted to Kevin yesterday. The modified lateral lines, which you requested at the last hearing.
So is that the document then that has the line segments labeled D, E, F, etc.? Oh, I see. I assume this is what you're referring to then. The thing the document from Drumloik and Associates.
That's correct. And the modified lateral lines are depicted in red and blue.
Not on my but when I'm looking at it, but I think they only scanned in black and white. I have a PDF file.
There's 3 drawings on here. If you go, actually more than 3, if you go all the way to the bottom, I believe that's the one he's referring to. It's cross section of the reds and the blues.
Oh, right. But if you back up, what I'm concerned about, even in making this modification, I don't understand line EM. Or let's back up, because let's start with, so the first one, page before that is where they were done. So what page am I? I'm on page 1 of the PDF file that came in. And that has all the labeled things like it would be done in Title 15. It's very nice to have the labels, and it's got a C, D, E, F at the property intersections with the water. My concern is line EO, which is lateral line coming out from E, doesn't appear to be bisecting the, that angle between FED. That looks to me, FED looks to me like a straight line. So EO should be perpendicular to it. I'm a little confused. Yeah, I mean, we have to start with step 1 before they're modified further on. And I don't understand EO. Maybe somebody can explain that to me.
Mr. Butler, if I could ask Mr. Price to answer that question.
Sure.
Sure. Yes, I'm from Drumloik and Associates. We provided the drawing that you're looking at. So this drawing is actually dated April 2017. Just wanted to point your attention to that. That was this was previously submitted to the Port Wardens Board at that time for an application that was done back in 2017. So line EO is coming from point E, which is the intersection of 9 Southgate and 11 Southgate. And it is headed toward the harbor line in order to keep a 5-foot setback from an existing piling that is belonging to 11 Southgate. And you can see we actually have a dimension. If you zoom into that drawing, you can see there's a dimension between that existing piling and line EO showing the 5-foot setback.
I see that. So it's my understanding, I'm not aware of anywhere in Title 15 where it says you draw lateral lines based on existing structures. And we actually, for a different application, we asked for clarification from the law department on this. And my reading of their finding, their report was that the ladder lines are based on Title 15, not on existing structures.
Right. And this drawing was prepared, like I said, in 2017. So we're providing that for informational purposes on the lateral lines as they were drawn at that time.
But they're not relevant for this application.
They are relevant for this application.
Well, because I don't understand. So I know from another court filing sometime past, there were applications presented, not this part of the creek, it was a different part of the creek, but an application that, you know, didn't follow Title 15. It got accepted. It was, you know, things, just because there was a lateral line in an application in 2017, we see all kinds of lateral lines and applications that come before us, and we've had some findings where we say we're not going to make an opinion on this lateral line because it doesn't appear to be correct. So in my opinion, looking at this, if you were to draw the lateral lines today, you understand Title 15, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so if you ignored the structures on the water and you drew lateral line EO today, would it not be perpendicular to line FEDC?
It would be.
Okay.
But
Thank
this is a situation, if I can continue, sorry, were you done asking that question?
Go ahead and you can make a comment, sure.
Sure. I just wanted to add that the reason that we are saying that it's still relevant is because this is a situation where the procedure for determining the modified lateral lines cannot be used to create 25-foot sections on the harbor for multiple of the properties that are depicted on this drawing.
But you have to start, at least, even when you attempt that, with an accurate lateral line using Title 15.
Understood.
Mr. Butler, if I may respond to that.
Yes.
The code also provides that non-conforming structures may remain. And in this case, the Board of Port Wardens found in its 2017 approval of the previous application for this property, the urban application, that the easternmost piling was non-conforming or grandfathered. You can't use a non-conforming piling if it is not included within the lateral line for that property. So the lateral line has to be adjusted in this situation to pass at a minimum through that easternmost piling, or perhaps by code 5 feet from it in order to accommodate the 5-foot setback.
I don't believe the code makes any reference to modifying lateral lines based on structures, based on trying to accommodate existing structures. As I said before, you are correct that existing structures that do not conform to Title 15 that as exists today can remain there. We do not, ask that they be removed. But it's also true that when new construction or, reconstruction, alteration of existing structures are come before, as an application, the lateral lines based on Title 15 need to be the basis of new construction in the developable area.
If I might cite to you 1502.010B, this title is not intended to deprive a riparian owner of any right or privilege associated with any fixed and permanent structure in the waterway lawfully installed and lawfully in use prior to February 11, 1980. And in addition, you have the section that states that unless notice is given by the Port Wardens within a date certain that a non-conforming or grandfathered structure is not to be allowed, which was not the case in this situation, that then becomes a fixed structure to which this applicant has a privilege which can't be removed. And you can't
understand, but doesn't this application go beyond the existing structure?
Yes, it purports to, but there for non-conforming structure, the only regulation is that the new improvements or extensions must comply with current setback. And that setback is determined from a lateral line, which in turn is determined by a non-conforming structure, being the eastern.
No. Yeah, I don't see how it says that in Title 15. And I mean, maybe maybe our legal department can help me here. I don't think that the existing structures determine where the lateral lines get drawn.
Do you want me to weigh in? I'm happy to.
Yes, thanks.
Yes, I agree with John, because I also am the one that gave him that advice. There are certain scenarios where the port wardens on a case-by-case basis can sort of make adjustments to the modified lateral lines in order to, I'm trying to find the actual code section, so if anyone wants to pull it up, they can. It is 151870C allows for the port wardens to, on a case-by-case basis, to sort of limit or make adjustments to the lateral lines in order to to actually comply with section 1502.010A, which is what I believe Dan or Mr. Kristoff just referenced. But in general, so in a very generalized sense, the lateral lines are determined based on Title 15, not based, are not created because there's already an existing structure in the water. They do have to conform with Title 15, but there is sort of a caveat to that.
So John, where does this lead you?
Well, I think without a proper lateral, the applicant is asking for new structures, beyond the, I mean, it'd be one thing, we've done replace in kind before where we didn't feel good about the lateral lines and we said we won't make a, well, our findings won't adopt the lateral lines, but it was replaced in kind, so it became a moot point. This is not replaced in kind, and so I have a concern. I don't feel that we can accept this application because I don't feel that it's a complete application.
Mr. Butler, if I may, how can you have recognition of a non-conforming piling to which a boat can be tied today and has been tied in the history of this site and not recognize that as being within the lateral line for that property? It's a non sequitur.
I think that I mean, if I were kind of interpreting when this code was written, whoever, I didn't live in Annapolis then, they allowed grandfathering because they realized when they created these lateral line, this developable waterway area, there were things already legally in place. They didn't want to mess with that, but they said, I think they basically said, have the grandfathering clause in there so you can replace in kind, but when you want to do something new, then you have to comply with the new code and the new definition of developable waterway. You can't link together grandfathered structure with a, kind of force that to be your kind of way to expand your developable area today for a new structure. If for the new structure, you have to comply with Title 15. That's my understanding.
Well,
the applicant can rebuild in kind what they have. We would, that's clearly within their right.
Well, section again, 1518.110A says a non-conforming structure which is non-conforming as to waterway setback shall not be added or enlarged in any manner unless the additions or enlargements are made so that the resulting structure conforms to the waterway setback provisions. That gets us back to a lateral line determination, which I believe and contend on behalf of the applicant is determined by a piling which has been determined by this board and found to be a non-conforming or grandfathered appendage or structure in the waterway. It has no meaning if it just sits there unless you're saying that any application for this property would have to be denied unless it's a replacement in kind. And if that's your position, I disagree with it and I disagree that that's supported by the code.
No, my position is that if you drew proper lateral lines and made sure that then the modification, you have to work out how it doesn't impinge upon the neighboring, lateral lines getting to the harbor, then you can certainly build within that developable area.
Well, again, I would respectfully disagree with your reading of the modification process, which says whenever the lateral lines are unacceptable for this property, not for neighboring properties. And as the testimony would indicate, if we ever get there, you can't do and actually, as Mr. Price has already testified, a modification process applied to this property can never reach a situation where you have a 25-foot clearance. That doesn't apply to neighboring properties. It applies only to this property.
Well, can you go back and show me? I'm caught up where you are in code. Where does it say for this property only?
I'm looking at section. I just had it and I lost it. We're looking at 15-18-070.
Right. And it says whenever the lateral lines are unacceptable as outlined in section 15-18-060. You back up to 15-18-060. It says a pair of lateral lines. When it says a pair of lateral lines, this whole section has you doing neighboring properties. Like if you back up, you have to go a certain distance. I forget the distance from the property, and you have to look at all the properties' lateral lines. A pair of lateral lines extended to the harbor line. Why would they say a pair of if it meant specifically this pair? It's talking about a pair. And then section B, if any pair of lateral lines extended to the harbor line results in the harbor line segment, et cetera. So again, it's looking at, because it knew, I think they were, even though there's a lot of problems with this code, and we've had that discussion here, okay, there's a lot of problems with fitting this into coves in different parts of the creek, but they knew they had to somehow, they were trying to get adjacent property owners kind of equal access to the harbor. And this code was trying to do that.
I'm not sure the purpose of the code, but I'm looking at a different section from you. I'm looking at 15-18-070.
Right.
It says whenever the lateral lines are unacceptable. You're only doing the lateral lines for this property, and they are unacceptable because they don't. The section says whenever.
Complete that sentence for section A. It says whenever the lateral lines are unacceptable as outlined in section 15-18-60.
Okay.
15-18-60 is clearly not about only the pair of lateral lines for the property that's for the application.
Well, again, I respectfully disagree. I believe that they're talking about if under the modification section, you don't result in a 25-foot clearance at the harbor line, there's a process which is set forth. And that process, again, as the testimony will indicate or would indicate, does not result in a 25-foot harbor line segment. And therefore, there's no sense in doing an imaginary calculation. It doesn't work for this property. If you're saying that there has to be a 25-foot harbor segment for every property within 200 feet on both sides, I would suggest to you that that has never been applied in this city and is probably impossible to do in this particular segment of Spa Creek.
Well, I mean, we clearly disagree, but just take, for example, let's say the neighboring property owner wanted to do some development, and they did their lateral lines, and they converged to a point. Now, you were just saying it's only for the applicant's lateral lines, which I disagree with you on. But let's say it was for the applicant's lateral lines. Now they're not getting there 25 feet. They need to modify their lateral lines. If you don't do it now, if you don't do it when the other neighbor is doing their application, then once they go and do their application, and they can't modify the lateral lines anymore because they've already been impinged upon by the neighbor who did not go through the modification process. I stand by my understanding of this code, especially since it refers back to 15-18-060, and 15-18-060 is clearly about all the adjacent lateral lines that you have to do all of the, and I mean, I think this is where you may have to get creative when you start doing a modification. How do you get everybody access? Because following 15-18-070 specifically doesn't always work. And so then you maybe have to get creative, but you don't just say, well, we can't do it, so we're going to shut off this other property owner.
Well, you can see from the example submitted, the red and blue exhibit, that if you apply the modified lateral line to 9 and 5 Southgate, it doesn't work. You don't get 25 feet. They cross over each other. They wipe out the riparian improvements on 11 Southgate, which have been deemed to be non-conforming. So you have a completely unworkable situation. And maybe the port wardens step in and say, okay, let's look at this and let's apportion the waterfront. Nobody's going to get 25 feet, but this would be an equitable resolution to the problem. In making that determination, do you then eliminate existing improvements, which have been there, as you found in your decision, for over 50 years in this situation, because you don't have a lateral line that complies or a developable waterway that complies? I mean, the code is unworkable as applied to certain situations, and this is one of them.
We live with the existing improvement, but we don't add to it and make more of a impediment.
Actually, this makes less of an impediment, as was pointed out at the last hearing. By removing those 2 pilings and approving the application or the amended application, as the chairman commented at the end of the hearing on the first hearing in September, he said, I find that this improves the access situation for 9 Southgate.
So let's just back up to what the conversation I had with the engineer. FEDC and the lateral line EO should have been coming out perpendicular. So even when you see when I look at the modified lateral lines, the adjacent property owner could have had a better modification if that line had been perpendicular. Instead, it's oblique. It angles out towards the neighbor's, the neighbor's developable waterway. I just, I don't know where else to go with this, Gene.
Why don't I intervene here a second? Am I correct that Mr. Christoph, you want to present a couple of witnesses, and we also have Mr. Biddle that wants to testify? Is that the universe of people that are waiting to testify?
Yes, on this case.
Well,
yeah,
not exactly.
No, we have two attorneys, Mr. Chairman, that would like to speak.
Hyatt and Wood.
Yes, Your Honor. I called you Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Kiley.
Okay. Why don't I give each side 10 minutes to and Mr. Christoph, you can control your 10 minutes and however you want to present your witnesses, and then we'll have Mr. Biddle. Do you want to control the witnesses on your side, or does Mr. Wood or Hyatt want to do that? Anyway, let's have 10 minutes of testimony from either side and try to limit to that, and then we can the court wardens can deliberate after that.
I have a lot of respect for the lawyers going through the code. I would love the opportunity just to go first to give the history of how this mess ended up where it is.
Why don't we let Mr. Christoph go first, since he has the floor, and then we'll come back to you.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of the 10 minutes, I'm going to call first as my first witness, William Bauer, and to avoid going through, propose to the board that he is a civil engineer who has been recognized in numerous occasions in his previous employment with Drum Loika as expert in, professional land surveying, and that he had submitted and had approved many applications for lateral line riparian improvements in the city, and that he in fact submitted as a part of the urban application in 2017 an exhibit which has been put before you by Drum Loika, showing the lateral line as it was anticipated and presented at that point in time.
Okay, not to interrupt you, but didn't you present those credentials in a submission to the board?
I did.
Then we'll make those part of the record and stipulate that your witnesses are qualified. That way you won't chew up your 10 minutes going through biographies.
Bill, would you indicate whether you participated in the preparation and presentation of the former Irwin application?
I did.
And as a part of that application, did you prepare the April 2017 survey that has been submitted to the board?
That's correct.
And did that depict the lateral lines and the then existing improvements?
That's correct. It did.
Were the pilings shown as determined to be grandfathered or non-conforming?
That is correct. Yes.
And was that determination agreed in by the Board of Port Wardens in its urban decision, a copy of which is before the Port Wardens?
Yes, they determined that the existing improvements were properly grandfathered.
Right? And do those lateral lines result in a harbor line segment of more than 25 feet?
They do.
In your opinion, as an expert, are the lateral lines shown for the proposed improvements on the application, the amended application currently before the Port Wardens, and specifically drawings 5, 10, and 12, correct?
Yes, based on the grandfathering of the existing improvements.
And in your experience, are existing improvements that are grandfathered included in the determination of lateral lines?
That is the route that we went for this application, yes.
Do you have any experience with that application in any other situations or for other properties?
I do not, as a matter of fact.
Okay. With regard to the application, what's your understanding of the if requested notation on the site plan done by Drumloika currently for the 2020?
The crosshatch blue and red?
No, I'm talking about the notation next to the non-conforming grandfathered pilings that they will be removed if requested or if required by the Board of Port Wardens.
Oh, that, yeah, if there's a new pier, that they would be relocating those pilings that, you know, are intruding upon a lateral line that bisects the angle of the two connected lines on the shoreline.
And do you have an opinion as to the effect that that would have on the waterway access to 9 Southgate?
That would improve the waterway access to 9 Southgate.
And with regard to that existing access, we have submitted a photograph of a sailboat, I believe it's a Hinckley, tied to the pier, existing pier, or as it was replaced in kind by the Urbans as part of their application. Would you comment on that photograph relative to what it shows by way of an obstruction in access to the 9 waterway waterline or water access, water develop area?
The opening between the two pilings between 11 and 9 Southgate is very narrow. So if 11 Southgate's going to remove that piling and construct improvements further to the east, or sorry, further to the west, then that's going to open up 9 Southgate's access to their developable waterway.
And those pilings can stay per the Port Warden's decision in 2017 on urban?
That's correct. They're grandfathered.
Does the lateral line exhibit modified per code, which is the red-blue crosshatched exhibit, correctly adhere to the provisions of 15-18-070 for modification of unacceptable lateral lines?
That's correct. It appears to do so.
And would a similar exercise for 11 Southgate result in an acceptable lateral lines, which would allow a 25-foot segment, harbor line segment on the harbor line?
No, it would not. And if they bent the lateral lines to conform with 9 Southgate, the red hatching, they would impinge upon 1 Tawny Avenue's existing improvements.
And in fact, do they not impinge on each other's waterway areas?
That's correct.
So it's unusable from any point of view.
Correct. Especially with the existing improvements where they are.
And that would, if in fact either of those were accepted, as Mr. Butler suggests, would it not wipe out the non-conforming pilings recognized for 11 Southgate?
That's correct.
I have no further questions for this witness, Mr. Chairman. Ask Mr. Larian to testify.
Sir.
Mr. Larian, I'm not going to go through what I previously prepared for you, given both the time limit and the fact that a lot of it's been covered, but have you ever had a situation where non-conforming improvements were included in a determination of the lateral lines?
Yes, sir.
Can you recall when that would have been and for what property?
(938) Creek Drive.
And what was the situation there?
The lateral lines, pier was rebuilt in 2017 and approved. They crossed the calculation of lateral lines. Again, in 2019-20, we went before the Port Wardens to do a modification to extend that pier, and it also crossed the lateral lines, and the Port Wardens approved it. Since then, the property has been subdivided, and they bought the adjacent property owner, and we're going to come back again with that set of modifications with the lateral lines intersecting the existing structures. So in 2 times, the Port Wardens approved it, with it crossing the lateral line as a non-conforming, and this will be the 3rd time that we're going to come before them. I'm not sure what the outcome would be.
Finally, in your experience in the city, have personal watercraft, kayaks, dinghies, etc., ever been considered as vessels for purposes of the limitation of 1 per 25 feet of waterfront set at in 21.64.410 of the code?
The city allows 1 vessel per property or 1 vessel for 25 feet of shoreline. But on multiple occasions, we've had the vessel approved for the 25 feet. In addition, a personal watercraft or a kayak launch approved, which does not count as part of the slip count.
Okay. Nothing further from Mr. Larry. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mr. Price, having listened to the testimony of Mr. Bauer, he has anything to add to the methodology that was utilized in determining the lateral line, the easternmost lateral line in the amended application before the board.
I don't have anything further to say. I concur with Bill's testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for adhering to the time limits. Are there any questions of any of these witnesses from the Port Wardens? If not, we'll move to Mr. Biddle and Mr. Hyatt and Mr. Wood. Mr. Biddle, you asked for you to lead off, and keep in mind that the 3 of you are splitting 10 minutes.
I just wanted to give the history because we've been there longer than anybody else at this point. My wife and I were unemployed newlyweds in Wall Street in 1990, and a naval professor, John Gephardt, had a startup that was going down, and they brought me in to shut the company down. St. Clair grew up on Southgate. She's the founder of Historic Annapolis. The house 5 Southgate was built by the owners of 7 for their daughter. St. Clair fell in love with it. She bought it in 1936. She raised her kids there. She grew up in China. Her dad was naval attaché. My wife's grandfather was his successor. They both taught law. My father-in-law was a 2-star. St. Clair's son worked for him. My wife has a master's in architecture and preservation. So she fell in love with us. The other neighbors on the street, if you've been around, they're all dead now. Tom and Curly Adams, they were there before us. Ben Michelson owned 3. St. Clair rented 5 to us, but left instructions she wanted us to have it. Dick and Helen Hafner owned 7. When 7 sold 5 to St. Clair, they kept a little 3-foot strip of water between 3 and 7. Admiral Adair, who was also a Yangtze River gunboat skipper, they were all over the place on Southgate, he didn't have 25 feet of waterfront. And back in the 50s, you still had to have 25 feet of waterfront. So if you look at the lot, there's a pie cut out. The original property line between 7 and 9 went straight to the water. St. Clair sold that corner to Admiral Adair so that he would have 25 feet. He's got 35 feet. They have 8.5 feet between those pilings to get to the water, which is absurd. They're selling the house. All of us had our property taxes raised by $1 million 2 years ago because they said we had riparian rights. The history here was Ben Michelson tried to build a pier, and St. Clair went after him because she didn't want a pier built because it would trap leaves in her cove. And then I tried to build a pier in 2000 along the correct lateral line. And my now dear friend Mike Mulligan said it would block his view. So my pier's at a weird angle. The structure that was replaced in kind, my understanding of the code, and I testified at the time, was if a structure failed, it could not be replaced if the cost exceeded half of the original cost. And you all decided to ignore that. But Elman Clapp, who owned that house, knew perfectly well that structure, when it failed, could not be replaced. They didn't have riparian rights. They didn't have 25 feet of water. During Isabel, I tried to secure my boat to her piling. And she said, Jack, you don't understand. If I lose that piling, I cannot replace it because of the cost side. So in any case, there's a solution here, which is for 11 to be happy that they got to keep a pier, that you guys didn't come in and say, this is costing 50% more than the original cost and you get nothing. Let them keep their pier, keep them where they are. And 9 and I will tear out my pier, tear out their finger pier, and we'll build a pier in the middle that we will share, because 11 can get a 45-foot boat into their slip today. There's been one there for years. That was Alma's daughter. I cannot get a 45-foot boat into mine, and neither can 9. But if 9 and I work together and 11 is frozen in space, the 3 of us in our multi-million-dollar houses can have a 45-foot boat. That's the only solution. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Wood, Mr. Hyatt?
I'll let Mr. Wood go first. I think he's got a little more to go.
Thank you for letting me speak this evening. The 2017 opinion by the Port Wardens simply allowed for a non-conforming replacement in kind. It did not get to the issue of lateral lines, and Mr. Butler's questions were exactly on point. The decision specifically said, the board concludes that neither of these navigation criteria are breached, talking about increasing boat congestion and navigation too close. Therefore, no basis to deny the application, and I quote now, or even get to whether the lateral lines are accurate or not. Clearly, the lateral line in 2017 was not accurate at the time. It's being used to try to now bootstrap this whole application, this whole amended application. It clearly is into my client's water at 9 Southgate. Mr. Butler is absolutely correct. The line EO is not the proper line according to code. It should be a direct perpendicular line out to the harbor line, which would not give them 25 feet and would make their property undevelopable. So they have this non-conforming use. They should be happy with the non-conforming use. That's really all they're entitled to. By moving this line out in an oblique way to try to tie into that pile, I mean, why that pile? Why not tie into some other piles even deeper into 9 Southgate's water? I mean, clearly there's nothing in the code that allows that. In fact, the code prohibits that. The code does not allow for expansion of non-conforming uses, especially where that expansion would go into an adjoining property owner's riparian rights or water. So Mr. Butler's questions were appropriate and exactly correct. When you try to do the revised lateral lines in accordance with the code, unfortunately for 11 Southgate, there is nothing that works. They do not have any developable water. Nevertheless, they want to extend a pier out another 22 feet. They want to have 2 sea-doos, kayaks, and a boat and on boat lift out there. Despite what Mr. Christoph said, the code defines vessel. I don't know how it's been interpreted in the past, but I know what the definition in the code says, and it would include sea-doos and it would include kayaks. And even if you only have 22 feet on the bulkhead, which is what they have, they can only have 1 vessel, even with the non-conforming use. So this amended application was obviously amended in light of what we had submitted before. It still doesn't comply with the code. It still should be turned down. And by the way, following up with Mr. Biddle said, there in 2003 there was a drawing done and an establishment of lateral lines that was done at that time, which provided for 25 feet at the harbor line, 4, 5, 9, and 11. We have it attached to my original submission back in October if the board is interested in looking at that. So there is a way to do it.
That was the compromise that all of the neighbors agreed to, including Alma Clapp, that we all agreed those were the lateral lines.
And so the lateral lines extend westward instead of eastward at I want to say a 90-degree angle, but it's attached to my submission of October the 26th, my first submission. So there is a way to do it. Now, I'm not sure what the exhibits we got this afternoon are supposed to show. If the crosshatched exhibit is supposed to show that there is a way to make these lateral lines work, I don't know if it's supposed to show it doesn't work or if it does work, but clearly it doesn't work. And when you look at that exhibit, you'll notice they're not making any adjustment to 11 Southgate. They're letting Southgate have these lateral lines that extend eastward out at an oblique angle to give 11 Southgate lots of area to the detriment of 5 and 9. And the crosshatches that are drawn on there clearly don't work because they go through the pier. They go Mr. Biddle wouldn't have enough room on his dock. He would violate the 5-foot rule. So I'm not sure what it's supposed to do. It says modified per code. If it's supposed to show it doesn't work, then I agree it doesn't work. So with that, I'll yield to Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Stephen Hyatt, 200 Westgate Circle, Suite 500, Annapolis, on behalf of 5 Southgate LLC. First and foremost, I believe it's worth repeating that Pier at 11 Southgate is non-conforming as previously determined by the Port Wardens. So the only thing that they can do is replace exactly what's there today. They cannot enlarge it unless, of course, they can conform to the waterway setbacks and other applicable provisions of Chapter 15, which you've heard several folks testify, I think correctly, they cannot. As for the lateral lines, these 2017 drawings clearly show that these are just desired improvements at 11 Southgate, and that they didn't follow the step-by-step analysis that Commissioner or Warden Butler alluded to. Basically, what it shows is that 11 Southgate, which only has 22 feet of shoreline, noting that the developable waterway area is the shoreline, the lateral lines, and the harbor line. With only 22 feet of shoreline fronting on Spa Creek, has 34.5 feet somehow on the harbor line, compared to 5 and 9 Southgate, which each have more than 30 and 40 feet of shoreline fronting on Spa Creek. Yet on the drawings submitted by the applicant, it shows on page 2 that they only have 12.5 and 12.4 feet on the harbor line respectively. It's just not possible. They can't do it because they only have 22 feet. And so what they have prepared clearly does not follow the procedures for determining the developable waterway areas defined in Section 15.18.10 of the code. Again, Mr. Wood just alluded to the same thing. The applicant shows 3 what they call buildable waterway areas, assuming that they're talking about developable waterway areas overlapping one another. It doesn't work, but the code does account for these instances that provide for a clear method for determining these lateral lines. And you look at all of the pairs of lateral lines that appear in this 200-foot radius, in some cases radii, and each one has to have 25 feet. Well, if you have less than 22 feet, you're never going to get 25 feet, so you're stuck with what you have. The problem for that is the problem for 11 Southgate, and they're stuck with it. In short, what they've prepared for you, allegedly, has no basis in the city code. It's a depiction of what they desire based on existing structures, and I will note that they can continue to use their easternmost piling because it is grandfathered, but there's nothing in the code that would allow them to expand their lateral lines. Perhaps, I think their previous decision said they could remove them, but they certainly couldn't use them as a tool to expand their developable waterway area. So to close, I would respectfully request the Port Wardens reject the application for failure to comply with Chapter 15. And to hold otherwise, I would argue, would ignore the negative effects on neighboring or riparian property owners 5 and 9, which is one of the specific criteria that the board must consider. It's a mandatory requirement under 1516.030C when reviewing an application for improvements into the waters of the city of Annapolis. With that, I'll yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Port Wardens, anyone have any questions of any of these? John?
I have a question for Mr. Wood, just because I've heard this mentioned in, I guess, an earlier meeting. Maybe it was the same application. I don't remember. That if you don't have 25 feet, you can't develop. Is that I don't know where that is in the code, so I would appreciate it if you could help me understand that part of the code or know where that is referenced in the city code.
So if you have 25 feet, you can have, if you have less than 25 feet, you can have one slip.
Is that in Title 15 somewhere?
It's in the zoning code. Hang on, let me see if I can find exactly where it is.
That's okay. So it tells you that's where you're allocated how many you can have based on footage. And I just okay, that's fine. Answer my question. I don't need a specific code reference. I'm mostly familiar with 15.
Yeah, you're very familiar with 15. John, you have the floor. Do you have a motion?
I have a motion to deny the application because they haven't produced lateral lines that are consistent with Title 15 and that we do not accept the staff report.
It's been moved. Do we have a second for the motion? I'll second the motion. All in favor? Aye.
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 So that's a 4-0. Okay, we will now move to the last application, which is 954 Creek Drive. And based on the testimony that has been filed, and we have some new information that was submitted to the record, I would like to encourage everyone that is going to testify to let them into the room. We'll swear them in, but we will let the aldermen talk first, since they've been very patient. And although I'm sure they're used to long meetings, we'll let them go first. So,
okay, I'll let them in.
Mark, do you want to let everyone in that's going to talk about this application? We'll just swear everybody in.
It's quite a group, so give me a second.
And I don't know if Alderman Gay is still here or not.
Hello, it's Larry. Maybe I'd have to tap this. We gotta have a camera on or something. How do you do that?
People should please mute their mics.
Okay.
Is that it, Mark?
Jess in there. Okay, if I've missed anybody in the attendees room, please raise your hand.
Okay, this is going to be a little awkward. I'd like for everyone that's going to say anything or testify before the Port Wardens to please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth with the Port Wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you very much. And we will start the public testimony with Alderman Ross Arnett of Ward 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would really like to reserve my testimony until the end, but I
do want to make a couple of quick statements. One, I have some requests for interpretation in with our Office of Law, and I have not received that back yet. I think they're germane to this case. Two, I've been working with the Director of Planning and Zoning. I think we have in mind something that can be a possible win-win solution. We've only spoken with people from Blue Heron Condominium. We haven't spoken to Mr. Pelham yet about it, but that also has some legal complications to it. So it's not ready for prime time. I would submit that because this dock is already in place, that I would beg for some more time from the port wardens so that we can develop this alternative, which involves sharing of the dock space at that area. In looking at the testimony submitted for the applicant, there are some newer legal issues that have also been raised. There's some questions about cities' rights and riparian rights and a lot of those things. So this may not be as complicated as the case you just heard, but I do think it has a lot of the same elements, including the need for some discussion about lateral lines. So if you would allow me to just make those couple of opening remarks, I will retire until all others have a chance to offer their testimony, if that's all right with you.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Gay is just, Alderman, we're starting by giving you the privilege of going first, if you would like to. Alderman Arnett wants to wrap up at the end, but would you like to say something now?
Oh, yes, please. I appreciate that. My apologies. I just stepped away. But just in continuing what I said in the beginning.
Hold on 1 second. I think Alderman Gay, you have to be sworn in before.
I'm sorry, you weren't here when we swore. You swear to tell the truth to the port wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Proceed.
Thanks. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the board for allowing me the time to speak. My apologies again for interrupting earlier. I looked at the agenda and I didn't realize we had shuffled the order. But just quickly, I just wanted to add to the conversation that I am not in favor of any particular project that would block access to public waterways. There is a struggle to maintain the rights to public access to waterways across the country, in particular in our city, as the shoreline shrinks to private ownership. And I just think that it's crucial in light of it, in particularly what took place this summer in the fight for water access and equality, that we, focus on preserving the existing areas for the public. We have a number of public housing projects, subsidized housing facilities in the area that rely solely on those areas for use and access to the waterways. Part of the problem is that we have not had equal investment into our communities and into our waterways. It just so happens to be by luck that the existing opportunity to access water are in communities that are outside of our economic reach. So I would just ask that the committee take that into consideration when considering projects that would limit the access, use to public waterways.
Thank you. I don't quite know how best to proceed now. It looks like we have about 4 witnesses, and I know the applicant. But why don't we limit the testimony of the public testimony? We'll limit that to 5 minutes a person, and ask that you not be repetitive or just repeat what you've already submitted for the record. So I'm going to just arbitrarily and Attorney Schaller and Parham, we'll wait for you to come at the end after we hear these, and then you can address what we hear. So with that, I see Mr. Krabenstein.
Hi, my name is Larry Gravenstein, and I'm the president of Blue Heron Cove Condominium Association. Blue Heron Cove Condominium Association has provided a right-of-way with limited public access to the water at Wells Cove for over 26 years. Our concern today is with the harbor master's recent placement of a sign designating that limited water access to the area as a small boat landing. We object to this designation based on the fact that the right-of-way ends at the water over a large sewer pipe. The sewer pipe is 4 foot above the water level. It's 5 foot wide. The easement or right-of-way is between 4 and 5 foot wide. At the end of that sewer pipe, there's a weir, which is a catch basin for any trash or anything that flows in from the entire Eastport shopping center and all the areas combined. This stated, and we put it in a written submission, we believe it creates substantial public health consequences, public safety, trying to climb over a 4 foot weir into a sewer drain. It also creates substantial liability and trespass problems for the city of Annapolis and for our condominium association. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adhering to your time. Do I interpret that as you're in favor of this application?
No, we're not about.
I would ask people to. We've got an application before us that I'm asking for evidence, and support for or against it. So, I mean, the sign is not within our jurisdiction. So I would ask people to address.
Didn't the harbor master put it up? He doesn't have any right to put up, does he?
We're the port wardens. We're not the harbor master.
Okay. So,
right. Miss Ruth Cogshaw, will you now have the floor?
Can we get the addresses also when they speak?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Cogshaw, can you also give your address for? Actually, they're in the they're in the agenda.
Oh, they are. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, Ms. Cogshaw's from 1010 Belcher Street.
Yes, thank you.
Please proceed.
I'm Ruth Anderson Cogashaw. I live in the Blue Heron Cove condominiums. And as I understand it tonight, there are actually two issues. One is Mr. Parham, whose property is adjacent to the Blue Heron Cove condominiums, wants to have a floating dock on his property. He has 60 feet of bulkhead property. He pays city taxes for that bulkhead property in addition to his property taxes for his residence. And I am in favor of his having his usage of that dock. I'm in favor of that. The other issue is water access. And I don't want us to get those two issues muddled. Of course, we want people to have access to the water, but as things are now, there is no access to the water. As Mr. Gerbenstein said, there is a pathway that goes down and it ends in a catchment basin. The basin is filthy. It has all sorts of trash, garbage, what have you. It has not been cleaned out by the city, and there is no access over that to put in a canoe, to put in a kayak, to put in anything to enjoy the water. If someone wants to get into the water, they have to leave the easement and go a few feet to the right, a few feet to the left. If they do that, they are in private property. So there's the issue of trespassing. There's the issue of safety for people. There's the issue of liability for the city. And the other issue, which no one has brought up, but is of concern to me, is, and I don't think the EPA would be very happy to know that the city of Annapolis and to know that the harbor master and the wardens of the port allow all of this trash and all of this to go into the beautiful waterways that we have here in Annapolis. And that's under 5 minutes, I think.
Thank you very much for adhering to the time. I would just remind everyone, all witnesses, that the jurisdiction of the Port Wardens is very limited, and it is limited to what is in the code. And our approving or disapproving of any application has some very strict criteria, such as navigational hazard, impediment to navigation, riparian rights. So there are some issues such as water access that are outside of our jurisdiction if we adhere to our sworn duty to adhere to the code. With that, we'll move to Mr. Stephen Sly.
Hi, I live at 952 Creek Drive. I'm the adjacent property, and I have no objection to the floating dock that's in discussion here. But also to hop back into this, the reason why it may be denied, that the city wants an access there, and while I can appreciate that, it's attempting to shoehorn something into a space that just isn't there. I stood at that spot, that exact spot yesterday, and looked at it. And Ruth is exactly right. Anyone trying to access the water there over that sewer, it's a formula for disaster. And if you say that you're going to allow access there and that Gary can't have his floating dock because that access should be allowed, that's a bit of a stretch. Matter of fact, it's an extreme stretch to deny him the use of that space when it's really nothing more than a cul-de-sac running into the creek that has no way for anybody to make use of it as it is. And even if he tried to build on it, really wouldn't provide access into that creek going forward. So again, in favor of allowing the kayak launch, and can't see any reason why it would be denied at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Other than Mr. Perham, the applicant, and his two experts, Mr. Shaler and Scott Milk, is there anyone else that I'm missing? I'm looking at a screen and I can't. Oh, Jessica Puckler. Sorry, you weren't on my screen. You're now recognized.
Thank you very much. So my name is Jessica Packler and I live at 506 President Street. So I know public water access isn't specifically the Port Wardens, but it is an incredibly important right of the citizens and the city, state, and federal government are required to protect the public access. But as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Godley, Port Warden's responsibility is to worry about navigational concerns and protect the public's waterway. And the floating dock, as it is here, not only blocks navigability of that area, which is a navigational area, but it also blocks the public's waterway. And in the last meeting, sorry, a little bit off here. In the last meeting, the owner's statement said specifically that physically speaking, there are two posts that can be moved. If you notice in the overhead drawing, there's a piling further out. So even if we slid the dock towards Stephen Dent's property, it would still not be navigable to come and go there. So Mr. Perham specifically said in the last meeting, when it was confirmed by Mr. Milky from the Waterfront Engineering, that float blocks navigability. Now, if there is question as to whether that space should or should not be navigable, I'd like to refer you to the grading permit application for the dredging that was approved by the city and the Port Warden in 2016 to have that space dredged, and specifically to have that space dredged to keep that waterway navigable. In that, so let me just go back for a second. Since 2014, myself and other neighbors have worked with the city to keep that public access space open, accessible for the specific access of navigability, so that when we could turn that in so that it could become a place where we could safely get on and off dinghies, get on and off water taxis, have kayaks come in and out. Clearly, right now, the concrete barrier, as the others have discussed, is not ideal for getting in and out. But anyone who looks at the application that Mr. Perham sent in can see that clearly the water access doesn't just end, the path ends at the path goes down and ends at that concrete, but the water access itself, the limited waterfront area as described in the plat and in the city council documents that were approved in 1986, shows that the water access and limited waterfront area actually goes to the left, and it's about a full 15 feet on that frontage. And that is clearly shown in the application that Mr. Perham did. And if you should have that in front of you, and you can see that it's also clearly shown in the plat that is filed in the Maryland plats. As many of you know, the only public water access between Fifth Street and this is the only public water access between Fifth Street and Truxton Park Boat Ramp. And in one of the letters that was sent in, there was some comment made that it hasn't been used and therefore that's why it shouldn't be continued to be used. And I would submit, as somebody who has been down there quite a few times, that one of the reasons it hasn't been used is A, there is no trespassing signs placed on the public water access area, and B, the neighbors in the Blue Heron Cove have been very open about not wanting the public to be down there on that space. This is they have made us feel like we cannot use that space. But since 2014, the city has multiple times gone down and removed boats and kayaks and other vessels that have been blocking that public access. The city has multiple times confirmed that that is public water access and that nothing can block the access to the water. And to say that somehow the riparian rights and the access to the water is only for looking at, as somebody suggested, is just absurd, because then you would also be saying that all along that entire frontage in front of all of the Blue Heron condominiums, their access is also only to look at the water, and therefore they should not have the right to be able to put in piers or other things. Public water access is public water access, and it clearly states in all of the documentation from the city council meeting and from the city council code and on the plat and in the declarations of Blue Heron Cove that property is that it is there. The 5-foot pedestrian path and limited waterfront area is a right of way for public access to the water. This 5-foot path and limited waterfront area has been dedicated to public use and shall be deeded to the city of Annapolis upon request. Again, in 2016, when the Port Warden and the city of Annapolis and
DNAP, I want to ask you to wrap up a little bit.
When city of Annapolis and DNAP approved the dredging permit for that Blue Heron Cove applied for, the planning and zoning plan and review comment said a 5-foot wide public access path and limited waterfront area for public use shall be maintained as approved. See Blue Heron Cove plat. That's on page 3 of the approval of the dredging permit that Blue Heron Cove applied for. Specifically, it was Miss Leon that applied for that. Secondly, on page 4, the memorandum to the Port Wardens from. Okay, well, I just want to finish this real quick.
One more time to please summarize.
The memorandum to Port Wardens from Frank Biba says the 5-foot path, pedestrian path at the eastern side of the subdivision is dedicated to public use for access to Wells Cove. The path can be deeded to the city of Annapolis. Storage of boats at the water end of this path blocks public access and should be removed. The owner of the floating dock has clearly stated that that water is not navigable with his floating dock there. And your job is to ensure that navigable waters stay navigable. And it is clear that his floating dock, which was put in without a permit and is an after the fact, so already should have been removed because it is after the fact. And we have, made multiple comments to the city about that. But it is blocking the navigable waterway and it should not be allowed to be placed in that space.
Thank you. I think we have one more witness, Mr. Hernick.
Thank you to the chair and to the Port Wardens. I appreciate being able to speak with you all tonight. The question at hand here is actually super simple, and we can delve into the code and all of the engineering drawings, but it's one of public versus private property, and whether you all will end on the side of preserving public property and public water access, as is very clearly put forward in many of the drawings and the record that Ms. Packler just described. Or if you side with an after the fact kayak launch that was put in on private property. And the problem with allowing the kayak launch as has already been put in on the private property is that it does infringe on the public property. And it sets an unfortunate precedent where people in Eastport and in Annapolis across the board are cut off from what is a defining characteristic of the neighborhoods that we live in. And it matters not just for us, but for our children, because the more public access that we lose, that loss of public access is permanent. And it's very hard to claw back in any way, shape, or form. And so I'll leave it at that, because I think the question is quite simple as to whether or not an after the fact kayak launch will infringe on what is public property and what is needed to protect a defining characteristic of the Eastport neighborhood, something that kids and future generations will be able to use, or if that's something that we're just going to foreclose on because a private individual decided to exceed what were the boundaries of their property right now. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I notice we have one more person to testify that just showed up on the screen, and I will say this will be the last person that we will hear from. Barbara Balak.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Barbara Belak, and I live directly across the creek from 954 Creek Drive. The property is listed on the construction permit as a residential property. In actuality, it is a vacation rental by owner property. Therefore, it is used for a commercial venture. Various groups of up to a dozen people stay at the property for short visits. On average, the occupancy of the groups changes once or twice a week. I am concerned that a high number of visitors to our city will use this launch without the least understanding of kayak use and boating safety. The use of this home as a vacation rental property has increased the use of Wells Cove by people unschooled in water and boat safety skills. Surely there are different safety precautions necessary when a kayak launch is used by a continuous stream of vacation renters than by one family. Thank you for the opportunity to give this testimony.
Thank you. Do any of the court wardens have any questions of any of these witnesses before we move to the applicant?
Excuse me, I had submitted a request to make a presentation also.
Who's speaking?
Barbara Beeler.
Go ahead, Ross, hold it just one second. Let's hear from Ms. Beeler. Ms. Beeler, you're not on their screen, so proceed.
Gene, I think that's because you have to scroll to see additional participants, maybe. I see you're in the participants. I just don't see. Oh, her video is off. That's why I know. Ms. Beeler, please go ahead.
Yes, what I'm hoping to do, if I can, is to share my screen with you.
I'd prefer you go ahead and not use any more time.
Okay, no, I hope you see it now. I am speaking, my name is Barbara Beeler. I live at 8 Spot Creek Landing in Eastport. And I'm speaking directly to the memo written by city staff recommending that you approve this application, but he provides a condition, which is that the platform would not block access, and it in fact does. And I briefly want to walk you through what it's like to take a look at this property. Here is the path leading from Boucher down. And then when you get to the water line, this is what it looks like. And this in fact shows that the platform does block access. And therefore, because it does, the only conclusion that the board should have is to not approve this because it does not meet the condition recommended by city staff. I do want to show there is a no trespass sign down there. This is the notice from the harbor master. And here is an overhead. You can see the area of the public right-of-way in green on the left shows the broadening of the public access that was referred to by Jesse previously. And overhead, you can see what this looks like and where the access, where the floating dock limits the access. There is, in the, Mr. Parham, I believe, commented at the last meeting about a piling that exists out there, which is the thing that would constrain moving the platform further outward on his property line. There are many questions. We have many concerns that we've would like to address. We will, if it's possible, submit a detailed writing for all the things we haven't been able to cover in order to keep up with the 5-minute request, sir.
Well, the record will probably close tonight. May close tonight. I don't want to be predictive of it.
I request that since we've complied with your 5-minute limit, which I was not able to ascertain there would be one, I would ask that we be able to submit this as part of that.
You want to submit this as part of the record?
And other comments that Jess has made.
The board will take that in mind. Take it under consideration.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time and your consideration, sir.
And let me also tell you that was a very interesting presentation for me graphically. I thought it showed some things that we hadn't seen before. So thank you.
We have an extensive, we have lots more of this if you want to do a Netflix evening, sir.
I think we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, with that, the applicant, where's Mr. Pelham? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, Mr. Pelham. Ross, you raised your, did you?
Yes, I think I can be very quick and brief, and I will tell you where I'm going to end up is to ask you to postpone a decision tonight because as I mentioned at the front, I'm working with the Office of Law. I'm trying to follow up on a very productive suggestion that Dr. Nash made, which I think has the prospects of being a win-win solution here. And in fact, if you can keep that last visual in mind where it's showing the overhead of the floating dock, I'd actually like if we can come to an agreement with Mr. Parham, with the property owner, to move that closer to the outfall and share it rather than move it back. But as I said, there's a lot of things that need to be worked out with the city and with the participants. But I will say that there's no doubt from the initial onset with the passage of Resolution 2286, the city has envisioned that there be a public access here. And it is very clear in the minds of the current city council members that maintaining public access wherever we can to the water is of paramount importance. I would like to believe, and maybe that's just the politician in me, that we can come to a win-win situation where we share that floating dock or some floating dock. There are some engineering considerations. I think the people from Blue Heron Cove have been quite correct in pointing out that you could not really, without great peril, get onto a floating dock over that catchment outfall without some engineering, which are things that need to be worked out. But I would just in closing say, I think there is a winning solution here if we're given enough time and we have a cooperative spirit on the part of all, and that we can both preserve the rights of the property owner and public access if we just have a little bit more time to sort through some of the issues. And so I would ask your indulgence to consider that. Thank you.
Mr. Alderman, I have one question of you.
Sure.
Since this is a matter of negotiation with the city and a private property owner, of what consequence is it whether we approve or don't approve this application tonight? Because the negotiations could continue either way.
Thank you for that question. If you approve the pier as is, then we're done. You've made that approval. There's no reason to try to work out any kind of arrangement. I would argue that the solution that Dr. Nash first proposed actually gives the property owner more in that the floating dock will be pulled back. We do have to worry about that piling. And if you can remember that overhead, that piling that on the space next to it from Blue Heron, they go out in a wider V, and so they take up a lot of space as you go out further, as opposed to just going straight out from the property line. And this is where we could get into John Butler's whole discussion of the lateral lines. But I think that we can reach an accommodation, and I think we can reach an accommodation that would satisfy everyone. If you grant the permit, I think that forecloses that. There is no doubt that there has always been the intent to have public access there. That is not going to go away. There is the possibility that we can make a safe landing from the public access, and we can come up with a cooperative agreement that allows everyone to have a launch from a platform there. The city could well buy the platform. You know, obviously this is depending upon the willingness of Mr. Parham, the property owner, to negotiate this. But this only cropped up last week in a meeting with the planning director and the members of Blue Heron Condominium. And there's a lot of issues that need to be sorted out. So I ask your indulgence on that.
Or wardens have any questions of the alderman? If not, I'd like to go to Mr. Parham and give you and your consultants 10 minutes. And especially since I know nothing about negotiations or alternative arrangements or anything like that, you might want to address your interest in willingness, et cetera.
Mr. Chairman, this is Charles Shaler, attorney on behalf of Mr. Parham. A couple of administrative items, and I certainly appreciate Alderman Guy's and Alderman Arnett's comments. I think they're well-meaning and they're right on the mark. And same with Ms. Packler and others, that public access is an important aspect today. Unfortunately, when deeds were created, they simply didn't provide enough public access out there. Administratively, I want to make sure that the Board of Port Wardens received my November 19th letter that includes the various plats that were referred to at the last hearing. It certainly looks like a piece of paper, Mr. Chairman.
We have it. It's part of the record.
Thank you. And so as the Port Wardens may recall, at the last hearing, we got into this public access issue and I rattled off a few plats live folio, and you asked me to provide them. I have done that. I see that Ms. Nash and Kevin have also given you the same documents. So you have those attached to my letter. You also have a statement from Mr. Parham and a statement from Mr. Scott Milkey, the Maryland licensed civil engineer. And on that administrative matter, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that Scott Milkey be accepted as an expert. He's testified before you on
He's
numerous
accepted.
occasions.
He is accepted.
Thank you. So
Stipulate that he's qualified.
thank you very much. I certainly am able to address many points, but I think they're laid out in my letter fairly clearly, and I think the chairman has touched on it, as well as the Board of Port Wardens has a limited authority. It certainly does not have the authority to address whether these plats grant public access or create riparian rights or any of the issues that people want to seem to expand, shall we say. They are the words on the plats. And as a lawyer, words have specific meanings. And it does say grant public access to the water. One of them says public access to the water area, 1,121 square feet, and an oyster shell path. That's the city resolution. I would submit, contrary to what Alderman Arnett said, was the intent wasn't to grant public access to and from the water, but it certainly was to grant access to see the water. It is a very small area. If this board agreed with the public access comment, you would be taking away a riparian right that is Mr. Parham's. He has 60 feet of waterfront, and under the zoning code, he's entitled to 2 slips. And rather than wharfing out and creating congestion, he has put a floating kayak platform and a small boat against his bulkhead, actually minimizing any encroachment within his developable waterway. If anything, he's taken actions that are less intrusive than many of the others that you could see just on Mr. Milkey's sheets 2 and 3 of his plans, especially the overhead aerial. So I think when the Board of Port Wardens looks at the application, you'll see no one has said that there's been an adverse impact on wildlife. No one said there's been an adverse impact on submerged aquatic vegetation. No one said that there's any adverse impact on water quality. So the question that comes for the Board of Port Wardens, frankly, is, does it meet the criteria in the code under subsection C? And we would submit it does. I think the only issue that the Board Wardens may have questions on would be, is there congestion in the waterway or does it create a navigational hazard? We would submit as drawn, it certainly doesn't create a navigational hazard being tucked up against his bulkhead. The kayak at best extends 9 feet from the edge of the bulkhead, when you can certainly look at other slips that protrude 20 or 30 feet out into the waterway. And there's certainly no congestion in an already congested area. So certainly Mr. Parham is here to answer any of the Port Warden questions. Mr. Milkey is here to answer any of the questions that you may have with respect to the developable waterway. I think Mr. Alderman Arnett did raise some interesting legal questions, because the city doesn't even hold a dedicated easement at this point. And the city admits that in their memorandum. So really, any property right with respect to public access still rests with the Blue Heron Condominium Association at this point. You have the neighbors not objecting on either side to this platform. What you do have are certain people who don't own waterfront, not wanting to see a potential water access point removed. We can put our platform in, people could still, if someday they want to try to launch a kayak over a cement catch basin, which creates different hazards, as everybody said, and they can navigate between the boat and the platform, because the kayak, last time I was on one, is no more than 2 feet wide. And so we can comply with the city's recommended condition that we're not blocking, quote unquote, water access out there. The city's recommended approval. It has looked at it. It believes it meets the criteria. And so we would ask the Board of Port Wardens to respectfully approve the application. And as you point out, Mr. Chairman, to the extent the city has an idea on how to make it a win-win, Mr. Parham is always willing to talk. And we said that at the last council hearing. And Ms. Nash and I had a subsequent conversation, and we've just run out of time. So with that having been said, I will yield to the board if they have any questions of Mr. Milkey or Mr. Parham, but we request that you act favorably on the application.
Fellow Port Wardens, any questions? I have one question that is on a new topic. Should we apply the same standard to an after the fact built illegal structure as we do to someone that makes a proper application? And I'm asking you this because I think we have numerous, with several structures that may not have been permitted that are in the water. And I have not gone to the city yet, but I think I wonder what kind of a precedent we're setting if we were to approve this application.
Chairman, I can provide some background on how that happened if it's helpful.
I understand that a contractor told you it was okay.
Well, it's a floating dock. And so it was unclear when it was installed whether that required a permit or not. That's clearly my mistake. Not understanding that more fully. When I was notified in August that it was a violation from Mr. Manasseh, the very next day I got in touch with him and commissioned Mr. Melky to put an application in. So it wasn't as if I was trying to work around. That was a misunderstanding of the code.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parham, I have a question for you. I mean, we have to act within our given authority on the legal criteria, but the code doesn't tell us how soon we have to act. If we were to delay this, since it's already in place, and I assume in use, and if we were to delay the actual decision on this application, our next meeting is January, not December, would that cause any harm to you?
Well, as you say, it's already in the water. We're using it. And so I'm interested in what Alderman Arnett mentioned. I think I have a sense of what that is about. I was in that meeting as well with Blue Heron Cove owners, so I kind of get the gist of it. We've got a ways to go in order to try to figure out what that would look like, but I'm certainly, would be okay with talking about it.
It would be my view, and I haven't made this motion yet, but my view is that we would be acting without prejudice to you and as a matter of accommodation to the alderman and, and taking advantage of your goodwill. But that's the reason I asked the question. So before I proceed, I don't see John Butler or Scott Anderson, but are there any other questions from my fellow port wardens? If not, John?
I have one question.
Yes.
Gene, so this is Scott. So, it's not our place to decide about waterfront access for the public, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
No, we have no authority to do that at all.
And if that platform has not been permitted, we could enforce that being removed, could we?
Yes, we could, yes, we could disapprove this application, which would require it to be removed.
Right, okay, I understand, okay. I don't think that's necessary. It is winter time and under the circumstances.
Well, that was a reason why I was kind of exploring the option of without prejudice proceeding. We would close the record so there would be no more testimony, and that would be my view. Well, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. If I don't have any other questions from fellow board members, I would like to I'd like to close this record, and the record is closed if this resolution, if my motion is adopted. I would like to postpone the deliberation and the decision on this until our January board meeting, without any prejudice to any party.
I'd second that motion.
Been seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Perham, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we will see you in January. Well, we may not see you, but you'll be on the agenda in January. And Alderman Arnett, you have now an opening for discussions and in a topic that is no business of the Fort Wardens.
I thank you. I thank you for your indulgence, and I thank Mr. Perham for willingness. I know this was sprung very quickly. He did hear it. Dr. Nash propose it. I really do believe we have an opportunity to make something good happen and actually improve his space on his waterfront. But time will tell. I guess the onus is on me and hopefully Dr. Nash and the Office of Law to come up with a solution.
Okay, well, with that, I want to remind everyone that we will have a 2 o'clock site visit at the end of, on December the 7th at the end of Newman Street. And then we will have a 7 o'clock Port Wardens meeting that night virtually. And we will have no meeting in December. We will have a meeting in January, at which time it is probable we will have a closed session, provided we get all the legal all the legal hurdles done for having a closed meeting, and that will be to consider procedural matters. So I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, for their patience, and for their willingness to be helpful in the community. So with that, fellow Port Wardens, we'll see you December the 7th and then in January.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thanks. Bye.
Before you adjourn.
We are now adjourned.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got to put some exhibits in the record. We do.
I will, I wasn't clear on that. You asked to be able to put exhibits in the record. The record is closed except for you submitting the exhibits you discussed with us, with the board. So that's the only exception to having the record closed.
So we'll be putting, I'll just name them. We'll put exhibit C through 5 in here. It's the Blue Heron condominium stuff. And we received 2 testimonies. That would be Mr. Sly and Mr. Grabenstein. Their testimony was written. And then I'm assuming Mr. Schaller's letter. I didn't receive a copy of it, but I'm putting that.
Kevin has that. Oh, this is Tammy. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I thought I was talking to the previous witness who did the slide presentation, who asked.
No, my apologies. I should have said Tammy.
Yeah. No, okay. No.
And then one other one would be just A1, Mr. Schaller's letter.
Yeah, but it still stands that the submission of, okay, I'll get some of these names right. It was the last witness anyway.
Barbara Beeler.
Barbara Beeler, yes, we will be happy to accept Barbara Beeler's submissions for the record
also. And other than that, it's closed. And with that,
Okay.
we're now adjourned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, very much.
Happy Thanksgiving.